Hey, welcome to another Studio Potter author chat. Today we're talking with Stephen Mullins, who wrote Paying the Bills for our April issue. Hey, Stephen, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Stephen, would you introduce yourself to us quickly and just give us some insight into how you started with clay?
My name's Stephen Mullins. I'm based in Sheridan, Wyoming. I got started in clay maybe like 12 or 13 years ago. I went to school for it. So I went to the University of Wyoming and got a BFA. And I kind of started in sculpture. And then as I went through, I got my art education degree. Then when I went back, I really got into printmaking and clay. And then so I taught high school for about, I think, 4 or 5 years. And then in 2018, I resigned from teaching and then worked, actually 2017, and then resigned and started working for a guy here in town whose business was doing really well. And then in 2018, he moved out of a spot and he's like, "Hey, it's all yours if you want it." And then that's how I opened up Red Bison Studio. And then yeah, I've been doing that like kind of full-time production and classes in a community clay center since 2018.
I really want to thank you specifically for sharing the lessons that you've learned with Studio Potter readers and the ceramics community. What I enjoyed most about your article was that you just got right into the economics. It was incredibly informative and helpful, and I think that the generosity that you showed in making yourself available to people who want to contact you even after the fact is, yeah, generosity is the word. It's incredibly generous of you. The first question I wanted to ask you for our author chat was, can you unpack some of the pricing structures that you talk about in your article and tell us how you maximize your profit margins while maintaining your price points in different areas? I know there are some retailers who were selling for more than you sell your wares for, and can you tell us about how you handle that?
So I have a couple of things that I try to do. I have multiple designs, and then so I try to make it. I try to have some designs that make it easy for people to kind of get invested in the product. So I'll have a low price point, and then I kind of work my way up to a higher price point. And so just some people are just going to naturally, I feel, be apt to go with the low price point, and then some people are going to be apt to go with the high price point. It's just like part of the deal. And so when I approach like retailers or wholesalers and I say, um, this is what I make, these are the items that I have that range from, 34 to $45 that I think would work well in your store. And then I say, if you'd like to do a wholesale account, there's a minimum order structure that makes it worth my time to make that amount of mugs. And then originally one of the issues I was having is I'd sell a bulk amount at a reduced price to a wholesaler, and then they would turn around and sell it for a lower price point than I was. And before I really had a digital presence, it wasn't that big a deal, but it was really important to me to make sure, like, hey, you're going to have to sell it for the exact same amount that I am. And so that's the route I went. I was real vigilant about watching other businesses and saying, hey, that's too low. You can't put these on sale. You can't sell them for a lower price point. This is what I sell them for. And so that is something I feel you should have in a contract if you work with a company, or at least have it written down that they agree to. And then this just happened like last year. One or two businesses, they turned around and started selling them for $5 or $10 more than I was. So that's it's like a couple things. It's like, well, either I'm devaluing my own work for myself. So I had to sit back and look like, well, do I want to charge more? Is it important for me to keep these things at a reasonable cost so people can purchase? Like, I don't feel like it's always about the money. Or is it this brand is saying our business is more powerful with our customers, we can sell it for more? Um, or they just felt like we want to make a little bit more on it. So when that started happening, I was like, well, I think I still am comfortable with it, because now that I've kind of really pushed to grow my e-commerce, if they're selling them for a higher price point, and then they come back and they find me, because I make sure to really stamp the bottom of my stuff and include cards and everything, and make it easy for people to come back and find me, I think that would really open the doors for people to, like, once they buy a product or they see that, if they have the desire to go find the maker, they'll end up working through me. But it's kind of interesting too. Some folks, like, they don't worry about that. They're more apt to have like a dedication to the people they buy to.
You write, I've seen people in the industry work with digital boutiques, podcasts, digital personalities, and brands, and all sorts of surprising avenues. And it seems to me this is one of the great parts about your article is you show how to find different partners, different avenues to increase revenue for the ceramic objects that people are making. And I had asked you in the editing process if you could get specific about what you meant by digital boutiques and digital personalities, and you did, and included in the article now is that you're referencing Harley Davidson or Gibson guitars, other brands where you don't have to buy a Harley Davidson motorcycle, for instance, to buy into the Harley Davidson brand. And one such brand that you partner with is called Go Fast, Don't Die. You say you supply them with mugs, tumblers, and other specialty products, that you've worked with them for several years and have seen your sales go from 30 pieces every couple of months to around 150 pieces a month, and that it continues to grow. I'd like for you to tell us a little bit about how you initiated that conversation with Go Fast, Don't Die, and how that relationship has evolved. I'm also curious about the kind of specialty products that you make for them.
And actually, that's like a super funny story. So I moved to Sheridan, and right as I moved to Sheridan, I was still teaching. And so I didn't quite have a lot of accounts set up. I didn't quite have like wholesalers and retailers. I just was getting everything going. And so for a period of like a month and a half, I had an Etsy site. And so I was like, I just threw some stuff up there. And this guy, now he's part owner of Go Fast, Don't Die. But when he had just moved to town too, and he was like, oh, I'm just looking for a mug on Etsy. And just by chance, the one I popped up in his feed, and he's like, oh, this guy's like 2 blocks away. So they came to my house, and he bought a mug, and we sat and chatted, and we like just introduced each other. And so we started an initial conversation that way. And then about 6 months later, they really started pushing their brand online. And I was like, oh, I think I could make something for you. And I know you like handmade pots already. So I made, I want to say I made 3 or 4 different tester mugs or prototypes. And then I approached them and said, hey, this is what I do and what I make. And it works for what I make, but I think I could also do something for your guys' brand. And so it was a really slow start, especially because it's like a motorcycle brand company. It's really interesting to me that like handmade mugs has done so well. And right at this time, I think handmade pottery was really starting to get some steam. And so as this has evolved, it's like they'll get a new design out and I say, oh, I think I could do something with that. And so I'll go back and now I'll sit and tinker and try to see how I can work with their brand, like their brand identity, and envision that on handmade mugs. And then I'll make that and bring it to them. And yeah, they'll say yay or nay, or they'll run with it or do some testers. And at the beginning it was like 30 mugs or 30 pints, maybe 2 or 3 months. And then as they have grown, it's like I have been able to grow with them. And so now it is like about 150 mugs a month. So, and now it's like we have, I probably do like 12 or 13 different designs. And then those will kind of ebb and flow. And so we'll do this one will be really hot for a month or 2, and we'll pull that and this one. And that's been really exciting. And so I also will turn around and I'll say, hey, I think let's try some cereal bowls with your folks, or let's try, like, I really want to make little flasks I think would do good with that community. And it's like, so it's like the gateway mug, that's what I call it, is people who aren't used to buying handmade, and they're like, oh, this is crazy. They'll get a mug, and that feeling, that weight, and the intention, a lot of folks I just don't think understand it till they get one. And so it's like, now that their customer base understands that, I think other products would fit in really well.
So when you talk about different designs, let's stick with mugs specifically. Are you, and you're developing designs, are you changing the form, or are you talking about just the surface design and how that has changed?
Yeah, so at the very beginning, I would see a design and I'd say, okay, maybe a nice, really angular mug uh, with like a flared bottom that comes up. That would be nice for this. And then maybe like a nice bulbous, And then as things got busier, I've stepped away from trying to change the form, but I throw a pretty standard shape now, and then I rib it and I give it like a nice line from the bottom to the top, and I give a really kind of clean but like sturdy lip, and then I do that for everybody. So it's like I'll throw things for my shop that are different in form, but for all my wholesale accounts, it's a standard shape. And then for each brand, like Go Fast Don't Die is really, they really revolve around white and black. So I'll use either a white clay body that really pops with white, a clay body that has granular manganese that has a nice speckle but is still really white, or like a nice clean black glaze. And then I can go in and put designs on there that match for what they need. So they're really nice because it's a very simple glazing process that like works with a lot of different things.
Thinking about Go Fast, Don't Die, and the fact that it's a motorcycle brand makes me think about tourism, and that makes me think about how there are so many tourist spots where craft tourism is also can make a viable living for someone who's invested in the craft tourism market. Sheridan, Wyoming is certainly a tourist destination, and you bikers are a big part of that. I would be really interested to hear more about how you have capitalized on tourism to help make Red Bison profitable. How have you tapped into the larger biker market of people that are traveling through? Because they're going west usually for different experiences than craft, and I mean the general tourist population, right, is headed out west for this romantic American dream notion. So how are you bringing them into the world of craft from Main Street in Sheridan?
We have a lot of really cool businesses, and we have a nice big long main street. And so two things before I kind of opened up a shop, when I was still teaching, I approached probably five or six different businesses in town who are all on Main Street. And so let's say for the kitchen shop, I would make utensil holders, crocks, and like certain mugs, and those designs would only stay with the kitchen shop. And then I would go down to this shirt company and I'd say, I can make these mugs that match with this business, and so only these mugs will be in this shop. And then I'd go down to the boutique and say, hey, I can make these vases, and these vases will work in this way, and they'll only be available here. And I felt like that really did a good thing of getting my name out. And then when we did like local craft fairs, people would be like, oh, hey, I've seen that. And so the craft fairs, they do a good job of closing down our main street every third Thursday, and people can walk and purchase from vendors. And so just by having a presence in the town, spread awareness of what I was doing with local folks, but then also with tourists. And then we opened up a little shop that was off of Main Street. And I know that's not available for everyone. Sheridan's got pretty low rent. But we were off of Main Street. And so it was really hard to get people to walk. We were only like 4 doors off Main Street, but it was super hard to get people to walk down there. So I had a sign out there. Me and my dad made like a treadle wheel that we put casters on. So I'll just wheelie that out to the corner of the street, and I'll throw right on the street when summer's good. And then say like, hey, we're right down the road. And so now that we were able to move on to Main Street, and that has increased our foot traffic like tenfold. And I still bring the treadle wheel outside. When people come into the shop, we have like my buddy's he just bought a taxidermy business, so he gave me this like it's like a antelope head on a human body that I put shirts on every month, and we call him Barry Manilope. And so, but that like we have all these little attention getters, and then people will come in and be like, hey, what do you do here? And so they'll kind of check out the shop. I try to talk with folks and explain what we're doing, show them all the things. I kind of take all sorts of payments like check, cash, card. I can do Venmo or PayPal right in the shop. And then I offer like, hey, I know you're probably traveling. I'm happy to ship it to you for like, and I'll make a set rate. And with shipping, it's nice. If you go through the post office, you get a good deal. So I'll have like a $9 flat rate, and I'll ship kind of anything anywhere. Or I'll say, hey, we can really package this up, put it in a box, and it should be good for your car. So it's like making people feel comfortable purchasing something like pottery and then giving them the option to ship or really package it up tight. That has really helped.
Stefan, in your article, you tell us a little bit about the way you have divided the commercial part of your studio practice, which is Red Bison Studio, from the more exploratory, experimental side of your practice. Will you share your future goals for both of those areas? I'm also interested in hearing about your goals and aspirations for how you see Red Bison Studio and also Stefan Mullins' personal practice impacting the landscape of contemporary ceramics.
Not last year, but the year before, I drove to South Carolina and deconstructed a kiln, and then we drove it back, and I just rebuilt it in my backyard. So it's strictly a soda kiln. And so my goal with that is which a lot of people are working in soda firing, but I really want to push like the introduction of either copper carb or cobalt, and really try to push some colors with soda. And so that one, it's kind of a bigger kiln, so I only get to fire it a couple times a year. And then the other project that I'm really excited about, I have a landowner kind of north of town who approached me and said, hey, I have this little bit of property. I would like to do something with it. Do you have any ideas? I said, yeah, I have a great idea for you. We should build a big wood kiln. And he's like, oh, that sounds great. So starting in 2019, we started hashing out this plan and getting everything ready to like start approach donors. And then we were going to start in February of last year, and then COVID hit. And it just I was like, oh man, it just kind of pumped the brakes on everything. So we did. I just kind of let that sit and simmer. He had a lot of experience with nonprofits, so he wrote out kind of like our budget plan. He wrote out our landowner agreement, and then starting in January, we re-met up and we said, okay. And I was like, I think we're ready to go. I think people will be excited about these kinds of projects. So starting in February, the goal of the project is called State Clay. And so I want to build a large anagama kiln and have it north of town and hopefully fit about 1,000 pots in it is the goal. And so then with the kiln, we'll reach out to all the high schools. So I have already reached out to all the high schools in the state of Wyoming, all the community college, and we only have one university. So I reached out to the university also. So the goal will be to bring all these students into Sheridan to fire the large kiln maybe once or twice a year. Twice a year is the goal. And so when they come, they'll be in charge of running one shift. And so then they'll get experience working with wood firing, which we only have one or two in the state at community colleges and maybe one or two with private potters, but it's not really open. And so I want kids to be able to come here, get experience firing, kind of work with our community colleges, professional artists, and the university. And then I am fundraising to bring in one national artist and one international artist in every year. Simon Levin's going to build. We're in the talks right now to figure out what time, but he'll do that in kind of early spring. He'll come build it, fire it with us once. And then Linda Christensen has been able to say she can come in the fall to do a workshop and fire with us, which is really exciting. And so once we started in February, we kind of had 2 or 3 of us who were all meeting. And then so I formed an LLC that would own the kiln, so that all of the kind of liability would be off of the landowner and would all be on the business. But as an LLC, it's really hard to raise money because people who are going to donate, they won't get any kind of tax break if they donate to a for-profit business. And so even the state of Wyoming, they do a pretty good job with grants, but they're like, what you can do is get a fiscal sponsor. So I approached our local nonprofit kind of community art center and said, hey, this is my project. Would you guys be interested in being our fiscal sponsor? And so what that does is it allows us to use their nonprofit ID through the federal government. And so people then will donate to Sage with the intention that Sage will turn around and give us the money for that special project. So it's really nice is that I feel like things can get really slowed down if you're working with the board. It can be difficult to like, hey, this is the project, like I want to get things going. But if you have to wait for a board meeting that only meets once a month, and then they like have questions, it waits another month, and then so it's like I just want to get this thing rolling. And so that has been really good. We just got our non-fiscal sponsorship maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I had already been in talks with donors. And so we had one donor approach us and said, hey, we think this is a great project. Wyoming's economy might be in some trouble with like the energy stuff going on. And so they're like, this could be a good economic boost. It'll at least like give awareness to the northern part of the state. We'd like to fund the build of the kiln. So the kiln was about half of our budget, which we kept super low. And so they're like, we'll build the kiln. And so now we just have to find a handful of more donors to fund the other part, which someone heard about the project through this other person. And they're like, hey, let me know where you guys are at. I might be interested in funding the rest. So it's like, oh, we're in such a sweet money spot for this thing. And within the next couple months, I think we could really kind of take off.
I love the way you see overlapping circles and possibilities and how you have used that to create programming and opportunity, not just for yourself, but for your community. A thing that kept crossing my mind while you were talking is that you must have a really good relationship with an accountant and an attorney, unless you're one of those people who just is so multifaceted that you have a deep understanding of the law and financial matters that you don't need to engage those services. But I'd like to hear about that either way.
I am definitely not accounting brained. And so even like I have an accountant that I'm like, hey, I do not understand this. I don't have time to sit and look. And so it's worked out really well where I went to an accountant, and actually I was on the board of Sage when I first moved to Sheridan. And so there was an accountant on the board at the same time, and I was like, hey, this is what I do. And so she's like, yeah, come in. And so now I just pay like a really low bookkeeping fee, like a monthly bookkeeping fee. I have 2 full-time employees, so they kind of handle all the taxes on that end. And then, and then just making sure everything's kind of buttoned up, which is so crazy useful because it's like, I just can't, like, I have no desire to even look at that stuff, which is dumb because you really should. So I'm trying to get better. That's one thing. It's like, I have to get better at that. And then the attorney thing, so I just started. I did reach out to an attorney for like a contract because you can go on and look. And I think I said this in the article. I'm happy to share that with folks because it did cost some cash, but it's like, one, it really protected me. Like when COVID hit really bad. So I'd sent some pots to a company in Colorado. COVID hit, and then like communication stopped with this company. And so I was like, oh no, like, I'd gotten like an initial deposit, but then I'd sent the rest, and it's like they were a first company, so I try to really work with folks. So I sent it to them in like complete radio silence, and I was like, oh my gosh, let's say I have $1,000 out there. COVID just hit. I don't know what financially is going to happen. I was all nervous. So I reached out, and then finally the guy emailed me back. He's like, hey, you shouldn't email me anymore because I got fired from being the manager. They closed the doors. And so he's like, I'm not your guy. Find someone else to talk to. And just like, whoop, didn't email me back after that. And I was like, man, you are the guy. Like, I don't know anyone else. And so I called around, and everything was closed, especially in that part of Colorado. They kind of got hit harder at the beginning. So, I mean, nothing. And so then I reached out through Instagram and I was like, hey, this is what has happened. This is who I was working with. And they're like, oh, hey, sorry about that. They ended up being way cool. And they're like, we have your package. We'll ship it back. And so I got lucky because they weren't custom pots. They were all like designs that I use in the shop anyway. So it worked out because we're kind of always slim in the shop with our own mugs. And so it worked out, but it could have gone the other way and like nothing happened. Or I could have just had to eat that, which would have been a real big expense. That would have been hard. So in that contract, it specifies like you have, that net 30. Net 30 means you send product to a customer. They have 30 days to pay. So with that, you're basically giving this company a 30-day loan of your product where, you're basically giving them free money for 30 days that they'll pay back. And if at that 30 days they pay, and if they don't pay by 30, in that contract, you can kind of specify whatever you want. But I used to have one company that was always hard to get to pay on time. So it was like, so I'll give you a little incentive. I can give you 1 or 2% off your order if you pay early. It'll be 8 to 10% surcharge if you pay late. And so it didn't matter. They still paid late, but it was always like, hey, so then once I got a contract, things kind of changed. And one, I think it's easy for folks to try to take advantage of an artist and be like, oh, they're just an artist, whatever. And it's like, no, I'm a professional. And this like having, and I don't call it a contract, I call it a work order. So here's your work order, and it is a legal document. But for me, it was easier for me to give a work order that was a contract and say, hey, this is a legal contract. You have to pay me or you're in trouble. Like that just felt weird. Instead of calling it a work order, felt better.
Stefan, becoming familiar with your practice through this article and the process of you writing it and the conversations that we have had over email, it kept coming to mind that there's always this push and pull between commercial success and artistic success. And I would be interested to hear you weigh in on that. That in all things, a balance is good. But if things are binary, like commercial or artistic, and then people tend to get strong opinions on either side of the equation. And of course, there are equal numbers of people that are talking about how those things can work in concert. But I would love to hear your perspective on that.
What's hard is when you go to art school, the focus is not on selling your work. The focus is on developing your work, which I think is really great. But then when you get out of school, you're like, what do I do with this thing? And so I think there's two things. Learning how to be like in Tony Clennell's book, he's got a good little thing where it's like, maybe we should change the way that we talk about ourselves instead of being like a potter or I'm an artist, like calling yourself an entrepreneur, which is like kind of a hot button thing anyway. But like we are the people as potters, like we're making the product, we're product testing, we're testing out the marketplace, we're doing research and development, we're going to workshops and like developing ourselves. And then we have to turn around and be a salesman. And then we have to turn around and make a website. And it's like to do this thing and like commercially, you have all of these artistic steps in between. And I think looking at each step as an artist and being creative, like, okay, so what is my work? What is my voice? What is my brand? What should my website look like? What should my social media look like? Like all those things should be looked at artfully. And then in terms of like making a lot of product or making things to be commercial, it's like I sit down, and I think that is something you kind of have to figure out in your own head. Like, so what do I want to be? Do I want to be like one pot is the most artful thing I've ever made? Or when I sit down to throw, I'm like, okay, each mug, like I'm going to become a better potter with each mug I throw. I'm going to look at each pot a little different. And even if I'm trying to make the same shape, like this mug, I'm like, oh, I want this foot to be like this. Or the next mug, I'm like, well, that foot was okay, but now I want the rim to be like this, or I want this gesture to be a little more and I feel like the one thing I've done a good job with is inform people like these are going to be handmade, and depending on what my emotions are that day, that's going to be different. Like it's just how it is. And so um even my mugs from, like, that's the thing I make the most of. People, like I said earlier, like the gateway mug, it's like even the handles um have changed so drastically. And a lot of potters will talk about this. When you first start, you have these giant strides in growth of skill, and then as the more you do it, it's like the little changes um are the things that take like 1,000 mugs to figure out. Like, oh, why didn't I do this? But like I wouldn't have been able to see that unless I made that many. So I think it's looking at it different. Of it's not bad to sell your work, and it's not bad to sell your work to a lot of folks. It's good. It's like I'm always trying to just make a better pot. And so by making a lot, I feel like I'm doing that. And there is a chance where you're like, oh, I know I have to get all these things out. I don't have a chance to even look and like digest this information that I'm making. And so that's what's good at the beginning too, because that's all you're doing. And then as the more you make, it's like, okay, I understand that now. What's my next issue? And so that has been a good kind of mindset for me.
One thing you've mentioned is that you were able to bring people on to work for you at Red Bison Studio. And that made me curious about your position on the traditional educational pathways. Like, are you more in favor? Do you think academia is the tried and true route? Or are you looking at, when you bring people in, are you teaching them the craft? Are you looking at that as an educational pathway? How do you feel about apprenticeships? I'm curious to know what your position is on education and craft.
Yeah, I think for me, what was really important for me is like, because I didn't get into clay until the very end. And I had a really good Margaret Hayden. She was the professor down at UW, and then David Bogus was there one year when I was there. And both of those guys were really good. But I needed like the basics a lot for myself. Like I needed which you don't take them serious too when you're like 19 or 20 of your fundamentals, but like that stuff gets ingrained, and it's really important. Like, okay, basic design and basic setup. And then for pots, you have to take all that artistic knowledge and put it into a functional object, which just the basic skill of throwing is really important. But then once you get that skill, you have to solve all these other problems. And so for me, it was important, but I don't think that's the only step. I think apprenticeship programs with a potter that's already established, like I think Minnesota always pops in my mind because they have such a strong, vibrant clay community, but they also had a lot of apprenticeship programs that happen. And it's like, man, if you could sit and work with a potter who'd been doing it for 30 years, and he's like, this is going to do well. You don't want to do this. And like, this is think about this while you make. Like, that is your all-in-one. Like, they're talking about business and form and like everything. I think, and I've never really done an apprenticeship program. I make sure to go to workshops every year, and I try to go to the Bray every year because it's just like this supercharge of an environment, and I love it a lot. And it's like good for me to bring it back, and I'm not trying to go there to get something to come back and commercialize. I'm going there to get like a sense of community, a sense of like growth as an artist, and then a sense of like, all those mindsets. Like, it's such a powerful thing to go to those, like you brought up Arrowmont, like those places are hotbeds of really cool things. And same with Red Lodge. I try to go there just to even look at pots and feel like it just charges you up. And they have a really cool series. And then for how my business is set up, originally I was going to try to train folks. Like I really wanted to be like, I want to grow you as an artist when you come here and work, but not everyone wants that. And so it has shifted to like, I really need a lot of help shipping work, and I need a lot of help glazing. So I throw everything, just in the fact that it's like, I know handles are really important to me now, so I want to handle everything. And then the forms are important, so I throw and handle everything. And then after that, we have a good system of glazing in this part and with this person, and then this person sands it or does decal work and then wraps it, ships it. And it's cool, you go back and research, and that's like kind of a standard setup, like one potter, one glazer, and then one person who markets. And so a 3-person system is, so it's cool to go back and find these little histories. And it's like, oh, that's kind of what we're doing, but it's like, don't reinvent the wheel. And so I've been trying to go in and just research like historical American pots anyway, or potteries, and that has been kind of helpful.
Well, Stefan, I just want to thank you for joining us today to dive a little bit deeper into some of the questions that came up while reading your article. And again, I want to thank you for your generosity in offering in the article and offering again here today access and willingness to talk with anybody who has questions about developing their own brand. And I wish you the best of luck.
I really appreciate coming on. I think it's great.